Welcome.
Welcome to the Everything Podcast, and in this episode I'm going to be continuing looking at the Big Finish news for July and August 2024. We're now on to the 16th of August 2024, and you might be asking, then well, you've just finished July, why are you midway through August? That is because the new Big Finish website was launched on the 30th of July 2024, and it didn't quite go according to plan. No releases were released, I suppose, between the end of July and the middle of August, which is why there's been no releases. The new app was working, wasn't working, was working. The new website was and wasn't working. It was all a bit of a mess. So they've now gone back to the original website for the time being. But yes. On to some happy news. On the 16th of August 2024, due to the website issues, we had two releases. We had Doctor Who The Lost Stories Death World and The Death and Life of River Song Last Words were released. So we're going to start off by talking about Death World. Here is what the press release from the Big Finish website has to say. The press release is titled 3 Doctors Dice with Death. The original multi-doctor adventure that predated the Three Doctors gets the Lost Stories treatment in Death World, a brand new full-cast audio drama released today. Big Finish Productions' Lost Stories range, which takes unused scripts and story ideas from the classic era of Doctor Who and turns them into full-cast audio dramas, returns today with a thrilling multi-doctor tale, Death World. This 2-hour audio adventure is adapted by John Dorney from the original treatment by Bob Baker and Dave Martin for what would later become the TV series' 10th anniversary serial, The Three Doctors. Death World is a very different story to The Three Doctors. Instead of Omega and Guards, it's death itself and the deadly sins that the first three Doctors must face off against. Death is playing a complex game of chess against the president of Gallifrey, and the Doctors find themselves used as pawns. Death World brings together the first, second and third Doctors, played for Big Finish by Stephen Noonan, Michael Charlton and Tim Treloar respectively, as well as Jamie, played by Fraser Hines, Joe Grant, played by Katie Manning, and Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, played by John Coleshaw. Here's the synopsis for Death World. The Doctor was dead to begin with, killed alongside his beloved Joe Grant in an explosion in the unit's labs, but Time Lords are notoriously hard to kill. Because with unit under siege, the Brigadier is rescued by two familiar faces, the Doctor he first encountered fighting the Yeti, and Jamie McCrimmon, with yet one more waiting in the wings. They are all pawns in a deadly game of chess, played by a being more powerful than any they've ever encountered before, and when you battle Death himself, can anyone ever win? Death World also stars Joe Shire as Death, Deanne Pilkington as the President of the Time Lords, and David O'Mahony as the Deadly Sins. Actor Michael Charlton, who now plays the second Doctor, said, It's always good to have three Doctors together. You get real fireworks in the dialogue. It's such an unusual, extraordinary story as well, set in Death World. It's a shame it was never put on TV, but it's great that it's coming out now. Third Doctor actor Tim Treloar added, Michael and Stephen give wonderful interpretations of their respective Doctors. What love is remembering that juxtaposition that the second Doctor and the third Doctor had. That hatred of one another, but deep down they admired each other. And Katie Manning, who plays companion Joe Grant, said, This brought back to me That moment, all those years ago, when we filmed The Three Doctors, and that is such an extraordinary feeling. Just thinking about it, I've got goosebumps. Every single actor that's ever played the Doctor has given it the two hearts, one for the actor and one for the incredible character, and they've all brought their own magic to it. There are three such beautifully different characters, and listening to them all together in this much longer script than we had of The Three Doctors, it's fascinating. Now over to our good friend Vortex, which is the free Big Finish official magazine, which you can view on the Big Finish website. So here's what it had to say about Death World. Big Finish's range of lost stories always attracts extra interest from fans who are intrigued by the possibilities of the Neverworlds and might have been. Since the range began, it featured stories adapted from fully written scripts or developed from improved details or names that never made it to this script stage, in some cases from just rough outlines. Each of the first 7 Doctors have starred, but the latest 2 releases feature something that hasn't been done before, a multi-Doctor story, as the first, second and third Doctors take centre stage in Death World, and the second Doctor appearing in Operation Werewolf, which I talked about in the last episode. Death World is based on the original treatment written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin for what later became even the 10th anniversary TV serial The Three Doctors. The script is very different to the story that ended up on screens. However, there's no Omega here, and instead the Doctors become caught in a temporal game of chess played between the President of Gallifrey and Death itself. The audio adaptation is written by John Dorney, with the first, second and third Doctors voiced by Stephen Noonan, Michael Troughton and Timothy Law. Producer and actor in this one, David O'Mahony, he says, after Bob Baker and Dave Martin submitted the idea for Death World in 1972, the script went through multiple rounds of rewrites and changes to characters, locations and actors to the point that the Three Doctors were completely different to the adventure first conceived. John and script editor Simon Gurrier wanted to go back to the original concept and explore what that idea had first been. Death World is the epitome of a lost story, taking a great idea and being able to fulfill it without the time and budget constraints of when it was pitched for television. John says, Death World has been on the back burner for many years. We always wanted to make it. We were going to record it and I was going to write it. But for whatever reason, we never quite got round to make it happen till now. And it was really good fun. I've not really done a multi-Doctor story before, so to get to play that sandbox was exciting. It was an intriguing one as well, because obviously we've seen the Doctors interact on TV, the Three Doctors, which meant we really didn't want to repeat those kind of beats. I don't think I have any lines like, oh, you've redecorated, I don't like it. Well, maybe I do. I wrote it so long ago, I tried to avoid repeating things we get in the Three Doctors though. John reveals that he had to be creative with the source material. He tells Vortex, I didn't have a massive amount to work from. I had a couple of pages of various things I found in other publications that suggested revisions and drafts that I couldn't track down. So I tried to meld them all into one. It was fun. I've written a couple of Lost stories before with a very similar kind of vibe, where there isn't an insane amount of data available at the same time, there isn't nothing either. It was a case of taking what I had and trying to find a way of making that work in a Doctor Who context. That was the biggest initial challenge I had. The adaptation was interesting because on one level you can see the ideas and how they led to what we actually saw on TV with the Three Doctors, but at the same time it's noticeably different as the style is a lot more fantasy based. There are crazy concepts like a personification of death and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, plus various mythical creatures and beasts. I felt that the approach with this should be the same sort of fun that you give any other story where you go, okay, let's tweak this. It's still recognised as the same story but you're allowed to develop it to a certain degree. I was trying to factor in all those things and then got some excellent script editing from Simon Gurrier and producer David O'Mahony. I tried to incorporate everything that was included in the Three Doctors, things like the flesh-eating virus, zombies and the 7 deadly sins. In particular, I remember one bit that people said clearly couldn't have been done at the time because it misunderstood the show's concept. But I thought, well, I'm going to do that then. The notion of what I wanted was the Doctors fighting the Lord of Reality as opposed to Time Lords. That was the root of where it all came together. John was also delighted to have some different character dynamics to play with compared to the television episode he reveals. I was very keen to include Jamie because in at least some of the early discussions he was going to be there, so that immediately gave me something new and different. You also get to have the relationship between Jamie and Jo, which was interesting too, which was entertaining to play with. The other thing that was fun was this meant We had the third Doctor with Jo and the second Doctor with Jamie, leaving us with the Brigadier to join up with the first Doctor, which isn't a pairing that really got to be explored on TV. I got to put them together, and it's particularly entertaining as the first Doctor has no idea who this man is. David says, the idea of producing the Lost Stories really resonates with me. With Death World, what a privilege it was to have all 6 of those leads, the 3 Doctors and the 3 companions. Stephen Noonan is so studious with his acting, he's very particular and does his research. He's one of those actors that will spend weeks poring over the script, thinking about every line and nuance. With Michael, it's lovely to have him involved, and that he has that twinkle in his eye that his dad had. You can hear it on audio in his performance. I say this every time I talk about Tim, but if you close your eyes, you're listening to Jon Pertwee. It's uncanny. I honestly don't think Tim realises just how great he is, and he has such a lovely bond with Katie. There was one scene where she was moved to tears, which I think is testament to how good Tim is. Jon adds, I just love the craziness of it all, really. I think one of the things that really struck me reading it and then watching a lot of Bob Baker and Dave Martin's work was that it became very clear that they're really good ideas, man. They're flinging many concepts at their stories, so if anything, my job was just trying to marshal them into a shape. Getting to play in this slightly different flavour of Doctor Who was fun. That was one of the key things I really enjoyed with this, playing in a rather more obviously fantastical environment. That's what Vortex had to say about Death World. Now I'm going to finish off this episode with the trailer for Doctor Who, The Lost Stories, Death World.
Did you know that the game of chess exists in some form or other in almost every advanced civilization across the galaxy?
From Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, The Lost Stories, Death World.
If you wouldn't mind, I am in the middle of a fascinating experiment.
Trap 1, come in! Can't have reached the base already. No! No!
Brigadier, I think I understand. I suspect you're in my future. And if I'm right, that means there's another me around.
You are not the Doctor.
Oh, but I think you'll find that I am, sir.
What's 3 of you?
I can't interfere with my own future, Brigadier. The consequences could be disastrous.
Doctor?
Doctor?
Doctor!
Oh, my word.
Jamie? Good day, Alistair. Good grief. Yes. You are face to face with death. And like that, the final king falls into my hands.
You fool, Doctor. You fool.
Now the real battle begins.
Joe, where are you? Who's this Joe? Oh, no, not you.
Would you two stop prattling away at each other, whoever you are?
Oh, no, not you. You too? Yes. Where are we?
I am the end of all life, and you are now entering my domain. Welcome to Death World.
Big Finish, for the love of stories.
That was the trailer for Death World, which I will be reviewing at some point, like with all of the releases I have talked about, apart from The War Master Part 1. If you'd like me to review that, then let me know and I will add that to the list. But yes, that's it for this episode. So the next episode, I'm going to start by looking at the other release released on the 16th of August 2024, that being The Death and Life of River Song, Last Words. But let me know what you thought about all the releases I talked about in this episode, and maybe if you've listened to the releases, Death World is the only release I talked about. So put that in the comments below, and also in the comments below, put any suggestions of things you would like me to cover on the channel as well. Runtime, they're now in runtime order, so things that are shorter will be done first, with longer, so movies will be done at the last, essentially. Unless it's a half an hour movie, then there might be a half an hour movie out there, you never know. But yes, that's it for this episode of the Everything Podcast. So make sure you like, comment and subscribe, and that's it for this episode of the Everything Podcast. Goodbye.